Okay, here I have a TV. This is an Ölevia, or Ölevia, however you want to say it. I don't know which way is correct. Uh, and I just had it in my head. 242S11. That's the model. And this was my TV. I've had this thing for a long time. And you know, I'm a big fan of the Ölevia brand. I have another one down in my shed and another one out on loan somewhere else. Well, I put this one out on loan. I had it loaned out to one of my friends, and when I first got it, it wouldn't turn on, of course, because the capacitors on the power supply board were bad. That's your usual issue. Now, this TV is from 2007, and my friend actually bought it brand new at Sears. That tells you how old this thing is. And it was hanging up on the wall, well, actually from the ceiling, but he watched that thing 24/7, and when he wasn't watching it, it was off at night, and when he wasn't watching it, it was still on, because he left every day or whatever. It was on basically pretty much all the time, besides for a short period at night when he wasn't watching it. So then I get it, I fix the capacitors, I loan it out to someone else who also constantly watched it. So this thing is an extremely high hour. And it never failed, besides for those capacitors, which, okay, that's common enough. But this has gotten a weird failure. They returned it to me, said, you know, we're just going to buy a new one if you wouldn't mind helping us hook the new one up. And, of course, I had no problem with that, so I took it back, and they said that it had an issue when you first turned it on, and then once it got warmed up, it was fine. So I was thinking, okay, I know these things have issues with the backlight inverter boards. I also know that these have issues with power supply boards, so I was thinking maybe a capacitor had gone bad, because these are capacitor plague era sets, and the only failure I've seen of an Ölevia set was the capacitor plague issues, and I've had probably 5 or 6 of them, and, well, that's not the issue. So I had it out in my shed. I've been playing with it for about a week, power cycling it every morning, every couple hours, power cycling it. I just had an antenna plugged into it, and it was picking up picture, audio, everything perfectly fine. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it on. And I finally found out what the issue is. As you can see, it seems to be working fine. And I'm going to put it on, let's see, if I put it on composite, turn that down some, you can see it works fine on composite. If I put it on, what's the other one, component? Yeah, if I put it on component, works fine on there. 1080i, everything's working, sound's working. However, and I finally found this out when I brought it in, HDMI, if I turn this device on, is the only input that has an issue, and right now it's not showing any signal, and it's going to eventually start acting really strange until eventually the signal comes in just fine. I opened it up, I couldn't find an issue. I tapped around on the board, pressing on chips and all sorts of stuff. Nothing seemed to make a difference. I heated the board up extremely hot, almost to the point where it was almost smoking, and, well, it was smoking actually, and just trying to reflow everything, and I did melt the solder, and that had made absolutely no difference. So it's not a solder joint failure. And once it does start working, once it's warmed up, if you tap it, press around on it, flex the board, it still does the exact same thing. And the signal should eventually come in if you just leave it. Maybe if I flip it around through the sources again, it will eventually come in. Still not. I want you to see what it's doing, though. Here it goes. No, almost. And like I said, you can play around with this cord. You play around with it all you want. Does the same thing on HDMI 1. Okay, oh, it's starting now. See, once it gets warmed up, it takes it a minute, and then it starts getting some signal, and it starts playing around and doing this crap, and then eventually it just starts working. So I'm going to pause the video, and I'll be back once it starts doing what it's doing. Okay, it's starting now, kind of. See? It's doing this, and then eventually it'll just become more and more erratic. Then eventually it comes in. The sound also makes funny noise. And it took like maybe 3 or 4 minutes to come in, and it'll still every now and then pop and flash. Sometimes it's worse than others, but once it does start working, it works great. The quality looks great, everything looks great. So I really have no clue. And then at that point, if I turn it off and turn it back on, it will still come right back on. So it's not an issue of when you first power it up, it's an issue of when it takes it a while to warm up. So I'm not sure if maybe a chip or something's damaged. I know the main processor chip on the board, when I pulled the heatsink off of it, it was really, really glued to it. Like the thermal paste had overheated and gone really bad. So I'm thinking maybe that has something to do with it. Either way, I mean, it works once it's heated up. But, I mean, I've never seen nothing like this before. But it seems to work fine once it gets heated up and looks great and everything. And if I have to eventually, I will buy another board. I mean, the main board is only $24, so on eBay there's several of them for sale. You know, I can buy one, which is the main issue. But I mean, I just don't understand. Like now, once it's come on, I can, you know, wiggle the TV around, and of course that wouldn't make much of a difference anyway. But if I was able to access the board, I could press on it and move it around and whatever, and it makes no difference whatsoever. So I really don't understand what the deal there is. Anyway, this is an Ölevia 242 S11. Alright.